By the time Riad Chikhani was 16 years old, he had already built a hugely successful online community for gamers and then sold it for a healthy sum. 2 years later, he founded the company that would eventually become GAMURS Group. And while it took far longer to gain traction, it eventually grew into one of the largest gaming media companies in the world, with outlets that include Dot Esports, Gamepur, and Gamer Journalist. In my interview with Riad, we talked about his early business pivots, why he invested big in esports, and how he drives synergies between 17 different publications. Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and this is The Business of Content, the show about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. If you want to listen to an audio version of this show, subscribe to The Business of Content wherever you get your podcasts. And longtime listeners of this show know that it carries no advertising. The only way to support the painstaking work I do here is by becoming a paid subscriber to my newsletter. Subscribers get a half-hour introductory phone call with me. They also get to submit questions every month that I try my best to answer on this very show. Subscribe at simonowens.substack.com. That's simonowens.substack.com. Or just Google the words Simon Owens and newsletter. Okay, on to my interview with Riad. Hey Riad, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Simon. I appreciate it.
So you're fairly young for someone who runs such a large media company, but you were actually even much younger when you first started building online businesses. In fact, you launched your first business when you were around 14 years old, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I was in love with a game called RuneScape and I found nowhere to really talk about the game. So after high school one day, I decided I would launch a website where I could share content with my friends and I ended up having founded Rune Gear at the age of 14. So yeah, I've been in the business for a bit of time now.
And what year was that approximately?
That would have been 2009, I believe.
Okay, because when you think of like forums, you think of like late 90s, early 2000s. So this was, social media was well established at this point. So you created this platform. What did you use some kind of third party forum platform? What did you use?
That's exactly right. I used MyBB, which was this open source community forum software. And yeah, social networks at that point were really thriving. But the last thing I wanted to do was share my gaming stats and achievements with all of my high school friends and sort of essentially confess that I was playing 12, 13 hours a day. So I didn't feel comfortable having sort of my real identity linked to my gaming activity. And that was what motivated me to kick off the forum. But completely agree, forums were early 2000s.
Yeah, and it eventually, I think, grew to like tens of thousands of users. How did it find an audience?
It's really interesting, because it was a bit of luck. I would probably attribute a lot of the success of Rune Gear to just right time and place. The game had continued to grow and develop, and I think we carved out a nice little niche where people could come on, they could share their content, but it was a bit less rigid than the other forums that were allowed. So we had a bit of I'd say, a wild west where people were sharing tips on how to, for example, lure people into the wilderness and everything like that. And I think they felt really comfortable having a place where they could privately share that information. So we ended up growing to, I think, 40 something thousand members over 3 years. And I ended up selling it just as I was leaving high school in 2012.
And was it like a case of like, because there wasn't a community elsewhere, like people were Googling how to solve problems within the game or something like that, and that's how they were stumbling across the forum?
Yeah, so it had both the SEO effect of growth, which was super helpful. Every day I'd come home from high school and there might have been another 30 or 40 people that had joined. And, that was really exciting. It's because they stumbled upon an article or a thread where people were discussing something. But many times what we saw was the network effect. People were inviting their groups of friends onto it. So they might have been, using TeamSpeak and playing RuneScape. And then they would say, oh, I found so and so on Rune Gear, you should join. And so we had these little tight knit groups in our already tight knit forum, which was really cool to see as a sort of 15, 16-year old that we were fostering these relationships online.
And where were you living at the time? Were you in Australia?
Yeah, so I was in Sydney.
Uh-huh. And what did your parents think of this, or did they even know about it?
They definitely knew about it because there was one day where I had sold an ad for about $1,000, and obviously I am not old enough to have a PayPal account at the time, and so I sort of moseyed my way on downstairs, and I had to sit with my mum and show her this website that I had created, and ask her to register a PayPal account where a company could send her $1,000. And I think there was this moment of, I think my kid's pranking me right now. But a few days later, the $1,000 hit the account. So I think they were very proud, but also probably a bit concerned that I had done something online and no one really knew about it as like a 14, 15 year old. So that was an interesting time.
Yeah, reminds me of the stories Mr. Beast tells now about his parents discovering he had this YouTube channel after he had been like running it for years, and they had. It's just weird. I mean, I'm a little bit older than you, so like I guess if I had grown up at the same time, maybe I wouldn't have told my parents what I was up to online. But it just seems funny that like they wouldn't know that this kid, in Mr. Beast's case, but also your case, that like he was running this like online website or this platform that was getting millions and millions of views, and they didn't even know about it. So it's funny. And I when I was a kid, there definitely was parent, like my friends' parents, like trying to stop them from playing video games and spending all their time playing video games or online. Obviously, probably that stigma has lifted a little bit. Did you run into any of that when you were a kid?
Definitely. Yeah, my parents and I always retell this story because they love watching, these interviews, and I call them out where they were like, get off the computer, get off the computer. I would get that every afternoon. And, I think at one point they sort of gave up and were like, okay, the kid's gonna game. And they got over that, a few years later.
Yeah, and so you mentioned that $1,000 for the ad. Were you regularly like? Were you actually like actively monetizing that forum?
So we, funnily enough, excuse me, we, funnily enough, were focused more on a monthly subscription to the website. Who would have thought at the time that I would have been sort of ahead of the curve, so to speak? So we had a group of members that were subscribing to a membership for about $3.95 a month, and then another group for $9.95 a month. So a majority of our revenue, albeit it would have been like $2,000, $3,000 a month, at the time was predominantly subscription based. So yeah, I was definitely actively monetizing it. I had to somehow pay for the servers and the hosting and the web design. And so it was a really interesting time. It was a crash course into running an online business, And back then it was sort of the wild west of the internet still. You could engage in these, different SEO tactics, and you could design your website. And I think at one point dabbling with click-through rate monetization on, what color the button was. And so trying to figure out how to better convert a member into a paying subscriber. It was a really cool time.
And you sold it when you were like 15 or 16?
I had just turned 17, yeah.
And who did you sell it to?
An entrepreneur in the UK who unfortunately sort of killed the business like a year and a half later, which was quite hurtful to see. It was such a big part of my sort of teenagehood, and then to see the website just get shut down a year and a half later, even though when I had sold it, it was thriving and growing. That was a bit disappointing.
Yeah, I'm sure that happens a lot where just like people have some extra money in their pocket. They think, oh, I'll just buy these online businesses that are already thriving, and then they're just like they have no passion for it or something like that, and it just dies on the vine basically.
You're spot on. And, I offered him 6 months of onboarding and gave him the whole sort of processes on what to do and how to engage with the community. And I think as soon as he took ownership, he was like, all right, I'm throwing all of that out of the bag, and, tried to do it himself. And he just shut it down. And I think that's sort of, you can see that consistently now, still in digital media where companies come in, conduct M&A, and then just completely forego the foundation or the DNA of what they've purchased for and opting in for what they think is a better strategy to grow that business that they had acquired.
And then so after you sell that business, you decide to then launch a new one. And I think the iterations of this company eventually led to what you're doing now, but it's definitely a lot different now than it was then. What was the original idea that you had?
So I wanted to take what I had built with Rungi and then do that for all games. And so the original sort of idea was to build what was like a social network for gamers. So the best way to sort of describe it is Facebook for gamers. You could come onto the platform, share your content, meet like-minded people that were interested in the same games that you were playing, and then also just build the go-to gaming profile for your identity. So imagine integrating your Xbox Live, PlayStation Network, Steam, Twitch, YouTube, you name it, the whole gamut. And then you could go and form private communities. You could do, audio calls on the website. You had a news feed, all of that. And so we built out this really cool, comprehensive technology that allowed you to sort of build your gaming profile on the website. And we worked on that, me and my co-founders for probably about 2 years or so. So when I when I joined university, we built that as a little side project, and that unfortunately failed. We weren't able to get the viral sort of growth that a social network needed. And so we had built this really cool, comprehensive technology. It was working really effectively, and it was really, I was very proud of what we built, but no one wanted, I guess, a social network for gamers. And that was sort of the end of it.
And you raised a little bit of capital, right?
That's correct. So, once we had, I'd say, an MVP, because I taught myself how to code and I went into computer science, and my co-founders and I were all either coding or, building the business somehow. So we were able to actually scrape by and build this technology for like less than $30,000 of our own capital. And, at the time, as a 17-year-old, I'm an 18-year-old that's working a $15 an hour job. It's a lot of money. So we had built most of the tech, got into an MVP phase, and then raised just under $600,000 over a few months in early 2015. But we shut the social network down at the end of 2015.
And did you have some money left over from the seed capital?
Thankfully, we had half of the capital left over, and I was sort of of two minds. Part of me wanted to repay back all the investors and give them, at least half of their capital back. But the other part of me thought we were also sitting there, with an opportunity to really provide a better experience for gamers. And so we opted to use that remaining capital to build out sort of a pivot from the social network per se. We wanted to build a platform that actually did something for the audience. And we asked our, the 200, 300 monthly users that we had on the social network, how can we better enhance your experience? And they said to us, they were looking for players to play Counter-Strike with. And, we thought that was actually a really interesting idea, because matchmaking services on those games might have been connecting you, or, having you play with someone that might have not had a microphone or wasn't good enough. And so we decided that we would build a platform where you could come on and you could recruit other people to play with, and just make sure that you're actually finding someone that knew the game or could play well or had a microphone. And we wanted to guarantee the success of that network. And so we found two very small websites that were also trying to do the same thing that we were doing, and they were ranking well on SEO and all that sort of jazz. And so we ended up acquiring them for pennies on the dollar. Like, it was so affordable and so, cheap. And we merged both of them in 2016 February with our new technology, which was, far superior and much more effective. And, we just saw incredible growth and traction. And, very quickly we grew to 30,000 monthly active users. We were clearly serving a need for our audience, and we saw incredible levels of happy churn, which you never want to see. And, we decided that we were onto something, and we ended up raising a bit more capital from there as well.
And how did it connect people? Like, what was the mechanism in which it would connect, allow people to find each other? I mean, Counter-Strike, from what I know, it's like a first-person shooting game, and you can basically find other players and go into the game and fight each other or whatever. So before, you were saying that they would get put into random rooms with people with different skill sets or different needs and stuff like that, and they wanted to find groups of people that they could play with regularly that were of the same skill set and similar personality and stuff like that. How was the site facilitating that connection?
It's a really good question. And, we thought really hard about how to fix that. And some of the crucial things was, do they have a microphone? And a lot of the times you might get matched with someone and they don't have a microphone. And, that would be really problematic, because you're trying to call out and you want to hear, what they're saying, and they aren't using a microphone. And, that really ruins the online experience. And, we had this thing where we could actually integrate your profile with a stat-based website. So we ended up acquiring that website as well. again for really affordable for an affordable amount, and that sat separately, and that was a network where you could come on, you plug in your Steam ID, and we would give you all your stats. So if you opted in on our team finding website to do that, which was sort of like a verified badge, which also boosted you and gave you credibility, it would integrate all your stats and your performance, so you could vet the person that you were playing with. And so if you came onto Team Find and you mentioned that you were, for example, silver or whatever, and you integrated your CSGO stats account, we would populate your whole profile, and then you could go and reach out to other people on the website and say, hey, I'm looking to play, and then the other person could invite you, and from there you could actually add each other on Steam and go and be on your merry way. And what we saw when we would survey our audience and just look at the analytics is a lot of people actually found someone, and we built this custom messaging software on the site, and we saw at one point over 1,000 outreaches per day on our website, and we were only getting like 1,400 to 1,500 signups a day. And so it was really exciting seeing how many people were engaging with each other and how much of the community we were serving with the technology.
Were you monetizing that platform?
We at a really small amount, we would allow you to boost your profile and your team for about $4 a month. But it was, again, because of the really high levels of happy churn, that was very ineffective.
So everything you've described thus far, the original forum, the Facebook or the social network for gamers, and then this kind of connection thing, they're platforms that were heavily dependent on user generated content and user interaction. How did you then get into becoming like a more traditional media company? Like what was that transition? What kind of sparked that pivot?
I'd say we're probably still transitioning, 7 years later. So that's a really good question. And, I tie it back to the happy churn. What we were seeing consistently was a user would come on, they'd find someone, and then they'd leave. And whilst we were really happy with the technology that we had built, we wanted to ensure that we could connect with that user at different touch points. So if you're playing CSGO and you're hating the experience that you're having on CSGO, let's solve that problem for you. But, how else can we better enhance that experience? And, we actually asked our audience, how else can we help you? And they said they were watching Counter-Strike on Twitch, and they couldn't keep up to date with the tournaments. And this is back in 2016. And so we were sort of taken aback by that. We were like, you're watching Counter-Strike tournaments? Like, we didn't really know that was a thing. We had heard a bit about the esports industry and whatnot, but we just it didn't connect in our minds that this was such a large industry. And so we went onto Twitch one day and we saw the IEM tournament, and it was huge. It had over 100,000 concurrents. And when I Googled the tournament, I wanted to look at the news, I wanted to look at the information or what team I should be following, or, who's going to have a breakout success or whatnot. I found nothing. I found really, small, I'm talking like micro independent publishers, and I found some larger websites that were trying to do it, but no one had a really comprehensive esports news offering. I thought that was pretty interesting, because it's like stumbling upon the NBA or the NFL, and no one's got a comprehensive content offering for that. There's no ESPN or Bleacher Report. So
were none of the gaming media companies covering esports?
They would cover it sporadically. You had, for example, at the time, you had IGN, which covered it I'm talking like an incredibly small amount of content, and a few other websites, but no one was comprehensively covering. I'm talking, end to end. When a League of Legends update comes out, what does that have? What impact does it have on esports? What are the transfer rumors that we're seeing? The tournament that's coming up. Who should we be looking out for? Is there something that we need to know? No one was really doing that. They had taken little cracks at addressing this market, but I think everyone was really just sort of like, we're going to focus on gaming, or we're going to focus on, what we do, and not give esports a really, hard crack at it. And so
they were targeting the the casual gamer, and not
precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And so you have this revelation that there's this huge community that's growing. And what did you do? Did you launch a website for it? Did you just start covering it on the website you already had?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we did. We expanded sort of Team Find. We merged that into gamers.com so we could be under one brand. And then we built a news website around that. And so we started covering it. But, in similar fashion to what we did with the team finding website, I wanted to leapfrog as much of that process as possible. And so we found three small publishers that I had referenced sort of earlier that had maybe two or three journalists. They were, publishing maybe 30 articles a month, if even. And we bought all three of them for really cheap, and then merged them together in April and May of 2016, and that very quickly grew. We hired as many people as we could, and we, within 3 months had started serving 300,000 readers a month across our first esports news offering.
And so, what was the name of this initial site, the merge site that you launched?
That was gamers.com, so the parent company today.
So gamer, and gamer is spelled with a U, right, instead of an
Correct.
ER. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So,
we can't
so
afford that.
yeah. No, it's great. It differentiates your branding. Lots of great companies have come out of purposeful misspellings. Google of all, the biggest one of them all. So you acquire these websites. They already had some journalists. I'm guessing you just kept on employing those same journalists, and so you start growing it. You mentioned that you had raised some money. So at what point are you actually starting to seriously monetize this and seeing that it's like a real business?
That actually took us a few more years. So we attempted to monetize along the way through a few different things. We launched an education platform where we could teach people how to play Overwatch and League of Legends and CS:GO. And what we realized, we were competing with game guides on the internet and YouTubers that were doing it themselves for free, and that would not be a sustainable model if it was ad driven or if it was subscription driven. Simply put, not enough people want to really learn how to become, the best mid laner in League of Legends, that you're going to make enough money from ads. And on the subscription side, you're just not going to convert enough people that want to pay $9.95 to get better at a free game. There was no logical commercial model, so that didn't work out. We had built a few other different products, again tied to sort of bettering your gaming, capabilities and whatnot. They also didn't work out. But in 2019, after having grown, gamers.com at that point pivoted into Esports.com off the back of an acquisition of the Daily Dot's esports news section in October of 2016. And we decided that that would be the best brand for esports news. And so we rebranded gamers.com into Dot Esports. But in 2019, we had two publications in our network, Dot Esports and Gamepur. And it was very interesting. That year was sort of a year of significant growth. Our revenue between January and August had actually increased by 300%. So we had quadrupled our revenue in about 7 months, which was extraordinary. We had built a much better programmatic ad revenue model on our network, which actually monetized really effectively, and we were able to sustainably grow the revenue as our audience continued to grow. And across the network also, between that sort of 7 month period, we grew from 2.5 million readers a month to 6 million. We ended up in 2019 in October, we surpassed 10 million monthly users just across those two websites, and also became profitable for the first time in the history of the company. And so it was an incredibly busy but really exciting sort of 12-month period in 2019, where we not only grew the network significantly, we grew our revenue materially, and we also became profitable, only for COVID to then hit us a few months later.
So, and this is coinciding with a huge investment in esports now, because there were a lot of investors who were convincing themselves that this was the new NFL, this was the new NBA, and they could get in the ground early. I mean, do you feel like you benefited from that Russian investment and buying up all these teams and launching all these leagues and everything like that?
Uh, it would be remiss of me to say we did not benefit. I think we most certainly benefited, but the question, that I sort of look at was how did we benefit from it? And I would say it was more on the funding side. I think we were we were given an easier chance to raise capital sort of between 2017 and about 2019 and 20 even because of the FOMO that was there in esports. Everyone sort of wanted to get in on it, and a lot of people had decided early on that teams were how to do it, and a lot of people had the completely opposite idea, which was teams are not the right investment. Invest in the infrastructure. So we definitely benefited from that, explosion in popularity for esports. Esports came before NFTs and cryptos and now AI. So I think we definitely did benefit. On the audience side, though, I don't think that really played a role because the esports viewership has always been an organic thing. You cannot force esports into a consumer's hand, or in front of their sort of screen. And so the people that were consuming our content, we acquired all of it organically. I don't think that really had much to do with sort of the FOMO and the explosion of the market.
How many rounds of investment did you ultimately have?
Off the top of my head, I think by 2020 we had done about four, but in total, sort of to date, we've done 7 rounds. But that includes a few at the early stage of very small seed rounds and an angel round as well.
And what is the pitch to investors? Is it like, esports is blowing up, we need this capital to acquire more sites, or what were you telling these investors you were going to spend that money on?
Between the time period of sort of when we founded the company all the way up until about 2021, it was exactly for that. It was, we want to acquire more businesses. We think esports and gaming is going to continue to blow up. It's an industry that continues to benefit from consistent rates of investment. IP that is, that was a video game is now becoming a movie or television or, a theme park. And IP that wasn't a video game is now becoming a video game. And so we went through with that pitch, and it used to be significantly M&A focused. In about 2020, so last year, we ended up closing our Series A. We raised 12 million US dollars, and that sort of pitch, remained. We would still look at M&A opportunities, but we raised capital because it made sense to raise capital at the time. Because while everyone was sort of scaling back their investments and refocusing what their business is doing, and people were just becoming a bit more cautious, we went the other route. We began investing heavily into developing more of the business. And so the pitch today ultimately is to build the number one destination for gamers and gaming companies alike. And so what that means, in very simple sort of terms, is we want to be the go-to platform for gamers, that are players, so that they can come onto our website, they can read a review of the game before purchasing it, they can read a guide about the game if they're struggling when they're playing it, they can engage with the news and the information around the game if they're watching it or they're engaging in some sort of capacity. So we provide them end-to-end comprehensive coverage. But on the other side, for a gaming publisher that wants to reach, a gaming audience in order to sell their games, or even a non-endemic that wants to sell to this audience, we want to make sure that we have the strongest and most intimate understanding of intention of a gaming consumer audience. What we've seen in the current market are these incredibly large, digital media companies, and they've done an extraordinary job, and it should be commended on building reach and audience size. But it's always quite dilutive. They're doing it across 20 or 30 different categories, whereas we're just focused holistically on gaming and esports and the subcultures around that in order for us to make sure that our brand stays as pure as possible and not deviating away from those categories, but also hyper focusing on understanding our targetable audience more than anybody else in the space.
Hey, I just want to interrupt the programming for just a moment to note that you are at the halfway point of the video. If you made it this far, then that's probably a sign that you like this sort of content. So maybe just take a second to subscribe to the channel below. If you're feeling especially generous, you can hit the like button. Okay, back to the show. How many sites do you run now? Like how many different sites are in your network?
So we have 17 publications across sort of two key verticals, and you could even argue that one of them, the subsections, become one. So 17 publications, and then we own 3 other micro websites that do sort of other things. Like, we still operate TeamFind 7 years later, which is great to see, and some other microsites.
And um, and do they have a lot of coverage overlap? Or are you covering? Are you buying or launching and buying sites that are like doing like sub verticals within gaming?
Uh, when you get to 17, inevitably you will have competition between the websites, and so we're comfortable with that, and so there is definitely overlap. And what you'll see many times is on a Google search result. Say you're trying to resolve a problem in, I don't know, a game called Payday 3, for example. You'll actually see our website will be number one, three, four, six, ninth place for that search result. And so a lot of the times we see that they will cover, say, similar styles of content, but we do all of that independently. When we acquire a business, a gamers, we allow them to maintain their original voice, and we allow them to grow that voice. We instill the discipline of what we've built as a really profitable and really sort of efficient publishing sort of mechanism. But so that is meant to support the operation of the website in really producing profitable content, and that will lift up the other content that they were originally creating that's very aligned with the brand. And so, they have their own independent voice, but they also gain the benefit of knowing how to publish profitably and, effectively.
How do you drive synergies across 17 sites? Like what synergies are there in terms of cross pollination of audiences, advertising opportunities? Like I'm guessing maybe they're all on the same CMS. Like what are the different things that you can do once you're scaling within the niche that large?
It's a really, really astute question. I'm not going to rattle off 18 different things, so I'll try to be as concise as possible. I think the synergies, you always have the basic corporate synergies, like one HR team, an administration team, and the same monetization stack and programmatic partners. And when you sell direct, you can sell across and so forth. So you earn all of those benefits by having sort of 17 or so websites. But where the real synergies come from, and something I'm super proud of the team and what they've done, is that sharing of knowledge and understanding. So we have this really incredible content editorial team and this really phenomenal audience development team. And I hate this word, but it's a symbiotic relationship. For the audience development team to succeed, we need a really strong and well-performing editorial team, and vice versa. And so they mesh really well together. So every website gets at least one dedicated audience development manager and so forth. But above that, where you have sort of the editorial leadership team and the audience development leadership team, they can funnel all of the learnings that we're getting across our 17 websites to other parts of the business. And so when we know a trend is coming, one of our websites, because we publish 15,000 articles a month, we own that whole process end to end. So we can control anywhere from pitching of the ideas, writing, editing, publishing, and distributing. We do all of that internally. So what happens when one of our websites does really well on topic X is we can then go and say, hey, we're seeing that topic X is popping off over there. Why don't we take a look at it? And so our other websites can use their resources to then take a look at it, build upon that narrative, and it allows us to completely dominate certain game releases. So to give you an example of that synergy in effect is last month, well, technically August and September, we had two major game releases. We had Baldur's Gate 3 and we had Starfield come out. They are extraordinary games. They're some of the biggest game releases of the year, and we saw incredible benefit from it. To give you some context on that, last month we delivered circa 27 million sessions to our whole network for those two titles. And that, is completely organic. In some instances, when you would search a certain keyword or a question or a query or whatever in Google, we would be 6 of the 10 results on the first page. And that's showing the synergies and the sort of symbiotic relationship that we have between our teams and how that comes into effect.
How much of are you doing original reporting and stuff like that, breaking news or even investigative journalism, or is it more kind of just consumer friendly type of this game is coming out, here's a review of it? Like, what's the kind of mixture of actual kind of coverage that you're doing?
It's a great question, and given that we're now publishing nearly 200,000 articles a year, and we're looking to scale that, we're always having this sort of constant tension and finding the right balance on what types of content we create. So, for us, building sort of a baseline database of content that continues to drive traffic is crucial because it allows you to build a sustainable and profitable business over the long term. But things like really solid news coverage, investigative journalism, op-eds, features, and reviews are also of significant importance in developing the brand. And so the company is currently going through, and that's why I said, we're transitioning into a media business and, have been for quite some time. The company right now is seriously investing in building our publications into really 360-degree brands. And, to essentially remove the, the ambiguity from that, excuse me, what we're trying to do is ensure that every one of our websites, where it makes sense to do so, has video support, social media support, vertical video support, and the journalists, we can build them up as to real thought leaders in the market. And that requires a bit of a deviation away from publishing just SEO and guide-based content. And so over the last 9 months, we've really changed that mix quite nicely. We used to be circa 60-70% SEO, and then the remainder was sort of news and public. We've actually grown news to about 40 to 50% now, which we're finding to be quite effective. But the goal is to continue investing in these different streams of content, but doing it in a really sustainable way. So, a couple of our websites now are being regularly featured in accolades trailers for a lot of major game releases because we're writing reviews about them. And given that we own some of the biggest websites in gaming sort of media, that's obviously doing really well for us as we build up the brand even further.
And you mentioned video. Obviously, a ton of gaming content is consumed on like YouTube, Twitch, probably, I'm guessing TikTok, and TikTok probably is another big one. So, like, what are you doing on that front? Are you developing like shows, like programming, or like what kind of video coverage are you doing?
I'm incredibly excited by what we're doing across video. Again, the philosophy of the company is to do things in really sustainable and profitable ways. And so our investment into video is probably slower than a lot of other companies that have gone into video, or the pivot to video, so to say, so to speak. And so, for example, on The Escapist, our largest YouTube channel, we've got a bunch of different shows on that are just doing so incredible. The numbers have continued to rapidly grow. We acquired The Escapist about 12 months ago at this point, and have grown the YouTube channel quite significantly. So, Nick Calandro, who's our head of sort of video strategy on YouTube, and Greg Johnson have built a phenomenal team. And so for example, The Escapist, that is now delivering anywhere between 7 to 10 million video views a month completely organically. And these aren't groundbreaking numbers by any means, but the thing is, it's creeping towards profitability more and more every single month. And for me, that's really important because we see what a lot of other digital media companies are doing, and they're throwing so much money at the wall, and they grow to 50 or 100 million video views a month and still can't pay, the bills for that. That's not the way that we do it. So The Escapist is a huge success story for us, and I'm really excited for what we achieve next year. We've brought on some phenomenal personalities in, Frost and Yahtzee, who've just done, phenomenal jobs. Yahtzee's been around now for like 16 years, and so we're spinning out more shows around what Yahtzee does. But also, for
What
example,
is Yahtzee? Sorry.
Yahtzee's a personality that runs a show called Zero Punctuation
Okay.
on
Okay.
The
Okay. Yeah.
Escapist. So he joined when we acquired The Escapist, and Zero Punctuation's been around, like I said, for nearly 2 decades, and they've just done an incredible job, and we're continuing to improve that show, by supporting it with different sort of revenue streams and commercial opportunities, so it becomes profitable. But sorry.
So I was just gonna say, and like, so in the way that like ESPN is very personality driven, where you have these, these recognizable faces doing Sports Center and these other, I mean, I don't follow sports, so I'm kind of talking out of my depth here, but like, these same sportscasters who are showing up at the pregame and postseason and all that stuff. You want to develop like a your own stable of personalities that people can recognize.
You're spot on. So we have an individual I'm an incredible fan of, So we brought him on at the beginning of the year. I had no idea about this. And one day I was watching The Escapist and I saw that we had a show called Cold Take. And Cold Take is run by an incredible individual called Frost. We've now brought on Frost full time because the community has responded so passionately to the content that Frost creates. And, as part of bringing him on, we said to Frost, we don't just want you to do video. We want to do a lot more around that into building you up as a personality and as a thought leader, which benefits both parties. We get as much, out of you as you'll get out of us. We'll help you build your personality and you'll help us build the brand. And, he loved that. That was sort of music to his ears. And he's now joined and we're launching again 360 degrees of content supporting that individual, the narratives and their storylines across different channels and different forms of content.
If you look at like the early history of BuzzFeed Video, there was a lot of clashes with their creators because they were making them sign these draconian contracts that made it difficult for them to do outside projects and stuff like that. A lot of those people ended up leaving and became huge stars on YouTube. Vox Media has also had some like really huge video stars leave and start their own channels. And so there's this like debate over how media companies should be working with creators so that there's this mutually beneficial relationship where they have incentive to stay and work with you versus going off. Like, is this something that you think about, or in terms of structuring your relationships with these stars? Like, how are you approaching those kinds of issues?
Yeah, and I think I'll answer that question by sort of talking about the philosophy of the way I've envisioned building this business. For me, staff retention has always been at the forefront of everything that I've ever done. You can read our Glassdoor reviews, you can see it in our C-suite retention. Our chief content officer and audience officer both have been here now for 7 years. I still got employee number one. He's our CTO. These are just examples of the fact that when we build something at Gamers, our intention is to build something with longevity and taking people on that journey and allowing them to reap the rewards of their hard work. So whenever we're having these conversations with individuals such as Yahtzee or Frost, it's about how do we build with you for the next 5 to 10, 15 years, if that even makes sense to you. And it's allowing them to be, number one, free in being creative. A lot of these people are super creative. So you have to elevate them so that they can do that. It doesn't mean that you let them be completely free and you're not getting what you need out of them as a business, because then there's no mutually beneficial relationship. So from the onset, from as soon as we start the conversation with them, it's these are what we expect of you, and this is what you can expect of us. Are we aligned? Does that make sense? If the channel grows really well, are you incentivized for you to stay with us, or are you going to go and leave? And inevitably, most people may leave if they just get to the sheer size that it just makes sense for them to do so. And in those cases, well done. It's why you're also needing to always have multiple individuals that you can build with and you can support and help them grow. So to give you an example, Frost was a relatively unknown individual in this space, not because he's not talented. He is so incredibly talented. It's just he hadn't grown his sort of audience and whatnot, and we're helping him do that. If in 5, 10 years he opts to go out on his own, then so be it. But what we've offered to him is what we believe, and hopefully he believes for the long term, is a mutually beneficial relationship. And so you define that early on and you work with them and you continue to revisit that and say, are you happy? Are you appreciating the relationship? Is it what you expect? We never make our staff sign anything that's like, if you leave you get punished. That's not been my sort of mantra. And so again, we've had no issues with staff retention.
And for the video content, are you mainly monetizing that through programmatic ads, like the YouTube Partner Network, or are you successfully selling like in-video sponsorships and stuff like that?
Yeah, no, I think it's becoming probably the most successful part of our direct sales go-to market strategy. The personality-driven content is actually so attractive for a lot of these different brands, and so we've had some really solid success in selling that. And that's why I'm really excited about our video offering, because that will become profitable in a short time frame than what we expected. To give you an example, in the last quarter on TikTok, we delivered 45 million video views when the prior quarter we delivered 7 million. And so we're just seeing, again, these really awesome growth rates that are being done in really affordable and sustainable ways. And we're just really excited to be able to work with brands on helping them reach this audience in really sort of organic and authentic ways as well.
And how are you structured now? Because like you have like three separate offices in different countries. What's the kind of infrastructure of the company, like from a
Yeah.
staffing standpoint?
So, the team's made up of about 160 full-timers and north of 300 contractors and freelancers around the world. We have currently three offices: Sydney, Australia, that's sort of corporate headquarters, product, technology, and corporate. Then you have Austin, which is where our media is headquartered out of, and we have around 100 full-time employees just in the US alone. Majority of them are remote, and then we have an office in Belgrade, Serbia, with around 20 full-time individuals. And that office is continuously, out delivering, over delivering on expectations. And, that's just an incredible team that we fostered. We've got a large team in the UK as well. Currently no office, but we believe that we'll probably set something up in the first or second quarter of next year. And that runs most of our digital operations. So think video leadership, social media, e-commerce, affiliate, things like that.
And what's the Serbian office? Is that your tech product staff?
Serbian, no, it's actually more European content creation and production. So as we've, set out to build a 24/7 newsroom that, provides a really good and sort of unique time zone that we normally couldn't find many people to do. So we ended up investing in a Serbian sort of office in Belgrade in May of last year. And the individuals that we've been able to hire and sort of retain have just been phenomenal. And so a lot of our teams, across our different publications, opt for European support from a publishing, and writing standpoint in Serbia.
And why have an office in Austin, Texas?
So that's where we acquired the Dot Esports brand from the Daily Dot. And so Kevin, who's our chief content officer, and our chief audience officer, Ben, are both located in Austin. So it just makes sense to have it. And it's also central time as well.
And so obviously, you've had a lot of success. There's been a lot of coverage of in the US of these kind of general interest companies like Huffington Post, Vice, BuzzFeed, most of them that raised tons of capital and kind of flamed out. I think you kind of hinted of it to like, how you're different in the sense that you went for a niche, and you see a lot of the companies that are succeeding, even like Axios, which you sort of think of as like a general interest publication, but they created niche audiences across, like they were very good at creating these newsletter centric niche verticals that were around lucrative industries and stuff like that. Like it seems like if there's some kind of lesson that we're learning from this is that niche is important. Going for a general interest, like huge mass audience, is just kind of worthless when you're competing against, the Googles and Facebooks of the world, which will always have much larger audiences and will always target better. So if you can have like a contextual audience, that's where you can get some differentiation from these large tech platforms. Is that do you feel like that's why you're succeeding?
I think you're spot on. You've hit the nail on the head. I think there's a couple of different factors in play as to why we're succeeding, but I think what you've just sort of summarized in such a concise and informative way is what will be the success playbook for media companies in the next 20, 30 years. Media is continuously pushed to adapt and grow and develop and change the way they operate. And I think the one consistent thing that has never changed is, number one, content is king. So the content that you create is really important. And when I look at some of the businesses that you've sort of just mentioned, the ones that are successful, their content is phenomenal. And the ones that aren't successful, their content is, you could take it or leave it. It might sort of be a reactive, you're scrolling on Facebook and you see the content. Like whilst that has room somewhere, it's about building something that's useful, engaging, entertaining, and just generally compelling. But more so, it's all about the context. If you are in the business of selling ads, how do you compete with Google that owns half of the internet? It is literally the gateway to the internet, or to Facebook, which owns, Meta, which owns Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. You're competing with businesses that have more understanding of anyone online than anybody else. And so where you come in is you need to build a business that is at the touch point of your target market's consumer journey. And that's exactly what we're doing at Gamers. Like I said, we want to be there before you buy the game. We want to be there after you've bought the game and you've played the game and you're having trouble. We want to be there, while you're playing the game if you're trying to read about something. We want to be at so many different touch points so that when an advertiser comes to us, we can reach the audience that they need. Facebook will be able to reach that same audience member that we can. It's just about hitting them during the consumer journey when they're more receptive to the right type of advertising. And that's what we've carved out. But also, there's a bunch of other different things that I will not go into because I'm conscious of time. But, building a business that's not just growth at all costs is, when you're building a media company, it's really easy to subscribe to the narrative that media isn't profitable. Media isn't profitable. And I think that's a very bogus narrative, We did it in 2019 and we've remained profitable for now 4 years. And we remained profitable during the peak and we've remained profitable even in the ad rate pullback. And, I read all the emails, I read all the articles about how media is struggling, and media has always been a challenging market because it's about three little segments: content, distribution, and audience. If you don't own all three, your business is always susceptible to being disrupted. And what we're doing at Gamers is having incredibly uncomfortable conversations with each other all the time to say, all right, we're in 2023. What are the next, disruptors of our business? AI, search potentially moving into towards AI, decreasing ad rates and so forth. It's like, okay, well then perfect. We know what is out there. We know what is going to be challenging to our business. Let's build towards addressing it. So, right now as a company, we're at 60 million uniques per month. That's an extraordinary number. Something I'm so proud of the teams and what we've been able to build, comparatively to everybody else with as little funding as we've gotten. And we've done it profitably and we've done it sustainably. The question is, will Gamers be at 60 million unique users in 7, 8, 9 years? It may be, it may not be. Because, Google might go down a different route, AI might go and challenge content creation, whatever it is. What that signals to us is if we're reliant on SEO for traffic, how do you, using the thing that we can control, which is content and distribution right now, how do we capture that audience member that's on our website and convince them to give us their email address or to register their account so that we can keep providing them with a superior experience and the best content? And so that's one thing that's really led to the success of the company is, our team has never been afraid of having uncomfortable conversations with each other. And I liken that to our retention and how long our team members have been working together, which allows us to build for the long term rather than, for short term quarterly targets.
We mentioned a little bit earlier that huge investment in esports, all that money going into it, launching these teams. We've seen some signs of that bubble bursting recently. Some companies have declared bankruptcy, missing revenue projections. I've seen some analysis that part of it is just because it's reliant completely on advertising, whereas like the NBA and the NFL, they're selling their broadcasting rights for billions and billions of dollars, and all the esports are basically streamed for free, and there doesn't seem to be any opportunity to actually sell the broadcasting rights. But anyway, given the pullback, has that affected your business at all? Obviously now it seems like you've diversified. You're not as reliant on esports. You're kind of more of a general interest, or you cover a lot of more general interest gaming. Has that affected you at all in terms of that pullback and investment?
No, it hasn't at all. There was a time in 2019 when I sat there with my team and I said, all right, let's analyze what people are reading on our website. And whilst esports is in the name for Dot Esports, actual direct esports content accounted for sub 5% of our audience. People were reading the content around the esports game itself, not the esports. So they weren't really interested in reading about as much about League of Legends, and the impact that will have on the team. It was more about the update that League of Legends had and how that will impact the game itself. And we saw the pullback happen earlier than sort of everybody else that was relying on like the Newzoo report, because people were less reading. We're not reading about Cloud9 as much as they were 2 years prior, and so we diversified very quickly once that happened.
So when you look forward, like, 2, 3 years from now, as you continue to invest, what would you like to be doing then that you're not doing now?
So, I spoke a bit about this. I'd like to have our social digital video efforts be substantially larger and and be profitable. That's number one. The core business, I'd love to be serving over 100 million unique readers a month, and we're well on our pathway to achieving that. But most importantly, I'd love to have a diversified sort of content offering that we provide to an audience of registered members and people that are sort of engaging directly one to one with our journalists and our publications. And so, being able to build a community around the publications that we own and operate, again, through a 360-degree manner. So having that be across video, across Twitter or X or Facebook or YouTube or Discord or Patreon, you name it. So when you have Dot Esports as an example, you're not just reading Dot Esports on the website. You're able to consume it through an app, on Discord, on all of the socials. You can watch videos that are covered by Dot, but you can also watch a journalist who's now a thought leader in CS2 or League of Legends give you a news recap. We want to build these holistic offerings because no one else is. Everyone else in the last sort of year and a half has indicated, oh, the market's really difficult to sort of operate in. And we've used that as an opportunity to actually double down on what we're doing since we remain profitable, and we can continue to grow our audience while everyone is pulling back. And so in 2 to 3 years, that's what I have, as sort of a vision for what the company is effectively doing.
And you want that? Do you want some of that to be like a paid product? Like you have to be a paid member to be in that Discord community or have those live chats with the reporter and stuff like that?
I think the news and the content should always be readily available to a vast majority, if not the whole market. Whether or not a portion of that will be a paid product is, I can't give you honestly a definitive answer because that will just be me, speculating. It all depends on if there is an appetite for that offering. Gamers will never become a publication that just paywalls general content that is of use to nearly everyone or a vast majority. But if we can effectively provide a product where a small subsection, Dot Esports has anywhere between 12 to 15 million readers a month. If there is a small subsection of 1 or 2%, so you're talking, 12 to 30,000 readers a month want to pay for it, so be it. We will provide that offering, but until such time as we can ascertain whether or not that will be, we're probably not going to go down that pathway until the data says so. Again, for us, sustainability is crucial.
Okay, Riyadh, those are all the questions I have for you. Where can people find you online?
You can find me directly on LinkedIn or the GAMURS Group on gamers.group, or follow us on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Simon. Appreciate it.